Thank you, Sean. Next up will be Ed Brayton talking about countering the religious right at the local levels and why you should run for school boards.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you guys coming out here on such a hot day. Not only is it 90 degrees outside, but we have the TV lights and we're all sitting here sweating like Mark Foley at a Boy Scout jamboree. So thank you for coming out and welcome to Bill O'Reilly's Nightmare. On July 4th of this year, a religious right group called Vision America, led by Pastor Rick Scarborough, joined forces with perpetual candidate Alan Keyes and announced a nationwide campaign that they call 70 Weeks to Save America. For those of you who are not familiar with Rick Scarborough, he's not quite as well known as James Dobson or Pat Robertson, but he's still a force to be reckoned with. He's a Baptist minister from Texas who was described by his good friend Tom DeLay as one of my closest friends. Scarborough is known for saying the kind of wacky things that we've come to expect from people like him. Earlier this year, for example, he announced that vaccines that help prevent HPV and cervical cancer are immoral because they prevent God's punishment for immorality. He also likes to call himself Dr. Rick Scarborough, though his doctorate is from an unaccredited diploma mill. Keep that little fact in mind, it will visit us again. Alan Keyes, you probably already know about. There's a picture of him in a cowboy hat that for some reason I just find amusing. Alan Keyes was born in Long Island and is Ivy League educated. The closest he'd ever come to being a cowboy was going to the bathroom at the Sizzler. He's run for the Senate 3 times and for the presidency twice. His highest vote count in any of those was 29%, so he's used to being kicked around far worse than I'll do tonight. Like Scarborough, Keyes has a habit of saying things that we've come to expect. In 2004, he told a radio talk show host that all gays are, quote, selfish hedonists and lack all moral character, and just to prove his point, he threw his teenage daughter out of the house when he found out she was a lesbian. Keyes is no stranger to hypocrisy. In 2000, when Hillary Clinton moved to New York to run for the Senate, Keyes was incensed. I deeply resent, he said, the destruction of federalism represented by Hillary Clinton's willingness to go into a state she doesn't even live in and pretend to represent people there. Strong words, don't you think? Not only was it wrong for her to go to New York to run for the Senate, and I happen to agree with him on that, by the way, but her doing so was nothing short of the destruction of federalism. I probably don't have to tell folks in Chicago what happened next. In 2004, Keyes moved from his home state of Maryland to Chicago to run for the Senate against Barack Obama, 3 months before the election. Needless to say, unlike Hillary Clinton, his doing so did not destroy federalism. Don't ask me why, and don't ask him why, because you're likely to get a long, convoluted, and highly emotional response that is sort of the way a dog looks at you and you try to teach him a card trick. So Scarborough and Keyes have joined forces, and their goal is to reach 2 million, quote, values voters, by which I assume they mean voters with the values to disown their gay children and tell them that getting cervical cancer is God's will. Their plan is to encourage their followers to run for local school boards and other local councils in order to advance their religious agenda around the country. We may not have a president we can vote for without holding our nose, said Scarborough, but we can impact county, city, and school boards by, quote, raising up God-fearing leaders at the local level. This effort is actually not a new one. It's a continuation of a campaign that began in 1988 by the Christian Coalition. In the aftermath of Pat Robertson's failed run for the presidency in '88, the Christian Coalition made a very public shift in strategy, going back down to the local level. Ralph Reed, then the director of the group, famously said that he would rather elect 1,000 school board members than a single president because, he said, the future of the country will be decided in the principal's office, not the Oval Office. The 70 Weeks to Save America campaign is going to follow their strategy. They're holding a series of rallies and seminars around the country, both to motivate people to run and showing them how to campaign and get elected. This strategy has already proved very successful, electing thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of their ideological brethren to local school boards. The result, for those of us involved in the day-to-day battle against the religious rights agenda in education, has been 20 years of having to put out fires all over the country. Once they take control of a school board, you can predict what follows. Their agenda is hardly a secret. Get creationism into science classrooms one way or another. Get an abstinence-only program into sex education courses one way or another, even if they have to ignore all of the studies that show that it doesn't actually lead to abstinence, but does lead to far lower rates of birth control use. In short, get God back into the schools by hook or by crook. They do this any number of ways, from inviting the Gideons to hand out Bibles in classrooms, to inviting religious speakers for assemblies, to putting Bible courses into the curriculum. I want to take a closer look at what happens when the religious right takes over. We're looking at two specific examples. First one is in Dover, Pennsylvania. A few years ago, a man named Alan Bonsell was elected to the school board in Dover, Pennsylvania. He would eventually become president of the school board, and the main item on his agenda was getting creationism into the biology classrooms. 2 years later, he was joined on the board by William Buckingham, who would soon chair the curriculum committee. He shared Bonsell's desire to find a way to get creationism into the biology classrooms. The biology textbooks used in those classes, Buckingham announced, were, quote, laced with Darwinism and needed to be balanced with creationism. In 2004, they succeeded in changing the curriculum to encourage students to learn about intelligent design, which is the most recent form of creationism. And they purchased a supplemental textbook called Of Pandas and People, and that's the picture that you see there. That decision led to the now famous court case of Kitzmiller versus Dover Area School District, a ruling in which the judge admonished the quote-unquote breathtaking inanity of the school board which adopted the policy. When that trial began, it became clear that members of that school board who had adopted the policy were suffering from a bad case of virulent ignorance. And let me define that term. I believe there are two forms of ignorance. One mundane and one virulent. Mundane ignorance is defined simply as a lack of knowledge. We are all ignorant of far more subjects than we are knowledgeable about. Ask me about how to fix a car and I'm going to babble like an idiot. I simply know nothing about it. Virulent ignorance, on the other hand, is the systematic accretion in one's mind of a collection of myths, half-truths, and outright falsehoods that gives one the illusion of knowledge. And that is precisely the sort of ignorance that the school board members in Dover had. It wasn't really that they didn't understand evolution. They didn't even understand the alternative to evolution that they were putting into the classrooms, intelligent design. When Bill Buckingham took the stand, the first substantive question he was asked after state your name, etc., was this: do you have an understanding in very simple terms of what intelligent design stands for? What does it teach? This is his answer. Other than what I've expressed, that scientists, a lot of scientists, don't ask me the names, I can't tell you where it came from. A lot of scientists believe that back through time, something, molecules, amoeba, whatever, evolved into the complexities of life we have now. Courtroom observers were a bit baffled by this. The definition that Buckingham offered was a not too bad amateur definition, not of intelligent design, but of evolution. And Buckingham was not alone. Not one of these school board members who had voted for this policy could give even a basic definition of what intelligent design was, nor did they have the most basic grasp of the theory of biological evolution. I would be willing to wager a sizable amount of money, and I would love to test this, that not one of the school board members who passed the intelligent design policy could have passed the final exam for the biology classes whose curriculum they were tampering with.